Hello, and welcome to my latest video. As I've explained before, for Wednesdays I am doing nerd videos. Sorry that this one's posting so late in the day. Actually, I chose the Sunday and Wednesday schedule because Sunday and Wednesday are usually my days off from work. However, we have too many people working in weekends, so they're trying to give everyone like this one Monday through Friday week. So for this week, it's mine. Yay! So I'll actually be off both Saturday and Sunday, but in the meantime, I am going to do my nerd video for the week. And today's subject is Star Trek novels. I promise I'm not going to limit myself to just doing videos related to media tie-in fictions when it's my nerd time. Next week I might do Game of Thrones, the novel. Maybe I'll do Doctor Who. Yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts about the 13th Doctor, and maybe I'll make a video about that. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk about, because I consider myself a literary trekker. What I mean by that is, let's say that we went back in time to a time when the only way to watch Star Trek was on broadcast TV or maybe basic cable or something. There was no DVDs, there wasn't even any VHS or something. So the only way to catch it is when the reruns come on TV. And let's say, hypothetically, I was reading one of my favorite Star Trek novels. I'm sitting there with the book open, reading it, and someone came and told me, hey, one of your favorite episodes is coming on right now. I probably would not put down the book. Yeah, I just happen to prefer Star Trek novels over episodes, as a general rule. There are some novels that are not quite as good. There are also some episodes that are also not quite as good, but as a general rule, I prefer Star Trek novels. In fact, it was discovering Star Trek novels that made me from a casual viewer into a die-hard fan. Basically, what happened was, I was on my first date with the man who is now my ex-husband, and the subject came up. It was sort of pretty much a blind date. He had a crush on me, but we didn't know anything about each other, and so we're in the car on the way to go grab something to eat, and he asked me, what I like to do, and I mentioned I like to read, and he goes, well, what do you like to read? I said science fiction, and he said, oh, me too. I was so nervous about this date that I stayed up all night last night reading this brand new Star Trek novel. It just came out the other day. It's only been out for 2 days, and I've already finished the whole thing. And, that sort of sat at the back of my head, because I've been watching occasional episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. Hadn't really gotten very deep into it yet, but, I was enjoying what I saw. And this was on the very beginning of my first spring break. Well, actually, I only went to 3 semesters of college, my only spring break. So by the time I got back to school, the idea had percolated in my head about, Star Trek novels. So I went to the school bookstore on Monday, and I found on the wall of paperbacks that they had. At that time I was only watching Next Generation, so the first thing I did was look for Next Generation novels, and the highest number was number 16. I figured, okay, that's the one that I had probably just heard about, so I grabbed that one, bought it, took it back to my dorm room, and at the time, my favorite novel was The Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov. The reason it was my favorite was because it was a perfect blend of science fiction and mystery. So I get this novel called Contamination by John Vornholt. If you know Star Trek novels and you recognize that title, you might realize that is also a perfect blend of science fiction and mystery. It was a murder mystery centered around some laboratories in the Enterprise, and just like with the Caves of Steel, the mystery aspect was so totally intertwined with the science fiction aspect So I loved that book. And yeah, a day or two later, yeah, first of all, I checked the school library. The only thing they had Star Trek was a collection of James Blish short stories called Star Trek Reader Number 4. That's something separate from Star Trek Number 4, which was also, a collection of James Blish's story adaptation of the episodes, but this was just rearranged a different way, different order of stories. And I read that, but, I went back and, by the way, Contamination is not one that I was able to find when I was doing a recent search of my Star Trek novels. I have it. It is somewhere in the house, but I just couldn't find it, and, I was digging through and found a whole bunch of other Star Trek novels. So, one of the next ones I got was this one, Fortune's Light by Michael Jan Freedman. Still one of my favorite Next Generation novels. That novel, great book, it's a nice little adventure story, a lot of intrigue, great book. And I was also looking, hey, I'm going to try some original series. At the time, this was actually during the 25th anniversary year, so it was about a year and a half to 2 years before Deep Space Nine came on. It was, certainly about 3 to 4 years before Voyager, and Enterprise was not even close to being certainly in Discovery. This was actually 6 months before, actually about 8 months before Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, hit theaters. That was the first time I had seen a Star Trek movie on the big screen since Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So, I was just getting into Star Trek. So I also bought Doctor's Orders by Diane Duane, and that was a very unique book. It gets kind of strange. That's pretty much, the best way to describe it is very strange. But over the years, I have enjoyed a lot of Star Trek novels. And I've since become much more of an original series fan, and I'm still very much a Next Generation fan. But when I was going through my novels to see which ones to highlight on here, I came across these. First is a very early novel called The Covenant of the Crown by Howard Weinstein. Great book. It's one of the earliest ones after Pocket Books got the rights to Star Trek in 1979. This one was actually published, was the third one published, and it was published in 1981. And the others were The Entropy Effect by Vonda McIntyre, well, the novelization of the motion picture, then The Entropy Effect by Vonda McIntyre, then The Klingon Gambit by Robert Vardaman. Another one that I've enjoyed, I really like Mel Gilden's work. He did 2 novels for adults in the Star Trek universe and 1 novel for young adults. I actually did not read the young adult novel. It's not my sort of thing, but, here's one of his novels that he wrote. It's called The Starship Trap. The other one was called Boogeymen, which is a really funny Wesley-based Next Generation novel. The Starship Trap is very good as well. And then, probably going back to that whole science fiction mystery thing, one of my favorites is The Vulcan Academy Murders by Jean Laura. My copy of that is also not readily at hand, but here's its direct sequel, The Idic Epidemic. This is not only a sequel to the Vulcan Academy Murders, it involves some of the same guest characters, and, but it also really is interesting because it does get to the heart of one of the concepts that is central to Star Trek, that is one of the most attractive parts of the Star Trek universe, the concept of infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So it's a great book, highly recommended, and there's definitely a lot of others I could recommend, and I just want to let you know, Star Trek novels are a great way to really explore the Star Trek universe. Now keep in mind, some of them are not as canon anymore as they used to be. As the different TV series and movies were adding to the official canon, they did not always consult the novels that had already been written, and as a result, you had some things like, for example, actually some of the novels they really liked, but they only used part of the ideas. There's a series of novels by Diane Duane in which Romulans call themselves Rihansu, and it nothing that in the first two of those novels, My Enemy, My Ally, and The Romulan Way, nothing in those contradicted anything that was known in the Star Trek universe at that time. Later writers chose to ignore those concepts, and those novels were popular enough that they eventually added a few other novels that were based around that Rihansu concept, and those were very popular, and they're a really great way of looking at the Romulan culture. But they don't agree 100% with stuff that was developed later in stuff, in the Next Generation, in the movies, that sort of thing. Another one, a lot of the writers who did develop Klingons in various forms really liked a novel called The Final Reflection by John M. Ford. However, they did not feel limited by that, and they developed Klingons in ways that were, in some ways, consistent with that, and in other ways, not consistent with that. That sort of thing happens, and media tie-in writers are very well aware of that. So, they will kind of, some media tie-in writers get a little sarcastic and funny when a subject of, well, your book's no longer canon comes up, because they know that they didn't write something that was official canon. They wrote, based on what information was available at the time, and they realized that, some episode writer could very easily come along and change everything that their novel was based on. No big deal. It happens. The novel's still out there. It is still enjoyable. Especially like, for example, with My Enemy, My Ally, and The Romulan Way. Those are still great books. Highly recommended. That doesn't mean that, they're the official canon. They're just really good books that happen to be set in a Star Trek universe that's different than how things ultimately played out. Still a very great way to enjoy the Star Trek universe is through the novels. And, there's some titles that I would recommend. The ones I showed you, I recommend all of those, plus Contamination, like I said, the Vulcan Academy Murders, some others. I don't go. I've read a lot of early Deep Space Nine and early Voyager books, but not quite as many, and I don't go back and reread those the way I do, so I'm not going to recommend a lot of those. There's been a ton of really great Star Trek books. L.A. Graff is a writer I highly recommend. J.M. Dillard. She wrote one of my favorites, Bloodthirst. I guess I love the concept of crossing genres because that is a Star Trek horror novel, a Star Trek vampire horror novel. She came up with a scientific version of how vampires could exist. It actually involves genetic engineering for creating bioweapons, and basically they created a bioweapon that, I don't think this would really be considered much of a spoiler, but because it's discovered fairly early in the book, but there was a bioweapon that mimics the effects of the genetic condition, oh gosh, the name just slipped out of my mind, but the genetic condition that, is responsible for a lot of vampire and werewolf legends where, people tend to be albino and very sensitive to sunlight, and they tend to have issues with their blood counts and stuff, so that they crave like red meat or drink blood or whatever. Oh gosh, what is the name of that? But anyways, it's a disease that's been associated with vampires in the past, and she comes up with a viral version of that as a bioweapon that, you know, allows for a really, really effective Star Trek horror novel. But going back to L.A. Graff, the one I'd probably recommend most by her is Death Count, which is really a great one that explores characters like Sulu, Chekhov, and Uhura, especially Sulu. Yeah, she's really good with, well, with most of the L.A. Graff books were collaborations among a few friends, but yeah, they are really, really good at exploring the minor characters like Sulu, like Uhura, and like Chekhov. Yeah, they're really great at that. So Star Trek novels are a great way to explore the Star Trek universe. And with that, let me say, live long and prosper. Thank you for watching, and have a great evening. And I will be back on Sunday with another transgender video. Don't know what the topic is. And then 1 week from today, I will have my next nerd video posted a lot earlier. I think I may have mentioned it at the beginning of this video, but my two most likely topics are either the Game of Thrones novels or Doctor Who, especially the 13th Doctor. It will probably not involve, like media tie-in novels. And for anyone who doesn't know, when I said Game of Thrones novel, I'm talking about the novel that was the source of the TV show. It is not a media tie-in novel. Most people are probably well aware of that, but it was the source of the TV show. It was not a tie-in to the TV show. Anyways, and I apologize that my hair is so itchy tonight for some reason, so sorry about that. But anyways, thank you, live long and prosper, and have a great evening.